Katherine Jackson's hands were shaking when the door to the screening room opened. Across the polished floor, standing under a single spotlight in full costume, was her grandson Jaafar. Wait, because what happened in the next 11 seconds would determine whether 200 million people would see Michael's story told right, or whether the biggest music biopic in history would get it wrong. The room went silent. Not the kind of silence that happens when someone stops talking. The kind that happens when everyone forgets to breathe because they're witnessing something impossible. Jaafar wasn't moving, just standing there. One hand extended slightly away from his body, head tilted at that unmistakable angle, and Katherine stood perfectly still in the doorway, 93 years old, staring at her grandson like she was seeing a ghost. She didn't know the cameras were recording. She didn't know that in 2 years, on April 24, 2026, this exact moment would become the reason millions of people would believe in this film. All she knew was that for the first time since June 25, 2009, she was looking at Michael, not a version, not an approximation. Michael, the way he held his shoulders, the weight on the balls of his feet, the micro-expression that flickered when he thought no one was watching. Jaafar had found the invisible thing. Jaafar embodies my son. 3 words. That's all Katherine said. But if you were in that room, you would have heard everything she didn't say. The grief, the pride, the relief that maybe, just maybe, the world was about to see her son the way she saw him. Not the headlines. Her son. Look, this wasn't supposed to happen. 2 years earlier in January 2023, Lionsgate was scrambling. They had the rights. They had Antoine Fuqua directing. They had John Logan writing a script that was clocking in at over 200 pages. But they didn't have Michael. They had auditioned actors who could dance, singers who could move, performers who could do both. None of them had it. That invisible thing. Graham King, who produced Bohemian Rhapsody and knew exactly what happened when you got casting wrong, was getting nervous. Meetings stacked from morning to midnight. Agents calling. Household names being floated. People who could open a movie on their name alone. Every single one of them was wrong. Then someone mentioned Jaafar Jackson, Jermaine's son, Michael's nephew, 26 years old, no major film experience. Fuqua's assistant pulled up some footage, a few Instagram clips, some family videos, one tribute performance that got decent response but nothing explosive. King watched it once, watched it again, called Fuqua. 6 words. We need to see this kid. Notice something here. This wasn't about nepotism. This wasn't about the estate keeping it in the family. This was about Fuqua, who directed Denzel Washington to an Oscar in Training Day, watching 20 seconds of footage and going completely still. They brought Jaafar in for a chemistry read. No script, no prepared material. Fuqua just had him walk across the room. That's it. Walk from point A to point B. Do you know how hard it is to walk like Michael Jackson? Not the moonwalk, not the spin, just walking. The glide, the way he seemed to move through space like gravity was optional. Jaafar had been studying this for years. Not because he thought he'd play Michael in a movie, because he grew up watching his uncle move, and something in his DNA responded to it. His father Jermaine had shown him home videos, footage nobody outside the family had seen. Young Michael at family gatherings, when the cameras weren't rolling, the way he walked to the kitchen, the way he turned his head when someone called his name, the unconscious grace that was just part of who he was. There's a thing that happens in families where talent runs deep, not just learned behavior, something passed down in the blood, the way a hand moves, the timing of a breath, the instinct for where the beat lives. Jaafar had that. He'd had it his whole life without knowing it was preparation for this exact moment. That's what Jaafar brought into that audition room. Not an imitation, a genetic memory. He walked across that room, and three studio executives looked at each other with the exact same expression. They had just seen a ghost, but Katherine hadn't seen him yet. And that mattered, because the Jackson estate had approval on casting, and Katherine Jackson was the heart of that estate. If she said no, it didn't matter what Fuqua saw, or what King believed. The answer was no. Remember, this wasn't just a movie to her. This was her son's life being put on screen for 200 million people to judge. She had already watched one unauthorized project get Michael wrong. She had sat through documentaries that twisted his words, interviews that compressed 30 years of context into 90 minutes of speculation. She was not about to let that happen again. So they set up the screening room meeting. And just Katherine. Just Jaafar. Just the key production people. No press. No publicity. This was family business. Jaafar spent the previous 72 hours doing something most actors would consider insane. He locked himself in a rehearsal studio with footage from every era of Michael's career. But he didn't study the moves. He studied the transitions between moves. The quarter second where Michael's hand changed position, the micro-adjustment before a spin, the way his eyes tracked across a crowd. He showed up to that screening room in full costume, not the Thriller jacket. That would have been too obvious. The rehearsal outfit from the Bad Tour. Black pants, white shirt, one glove. Simple. He didn't tell anyone he was going to do this. He just walked in and took his position under the light. When Katherine walked in and froze, the room held its breath for what felt like an hour but was actually 11 seconds. Then she said those three words. Jaafar embodies my son. Antoine Fuqua doesn't cry at work. He had to turn his head away because his eyes were watering. They started principal photography in January 2024, right after the SAG-AFTRA strike ended. 5 months of shooting, 16-hour days. Jaafar, losing 20 pounds to match Michael's frame in different eras, learning to sing in Michael's voice, learning the dances. Stop for a second and picture what that preparation looked like. Jaafar, working with vocal coaches who had studied Michael's technique for decades, breaking down every breath, every placement, every choice Michael made when he approached a microphone. The soft whispered delivery in Human Nature, the raw power in They Don't Care About Us, the playful energy in The Way You Make Me Feel. Each one required a different approach, a different part of his voice, a different emotional truth. The dance rehearsals were even more intense. Jaafar had grown up dancing, but dancing like yourself and dancing like Michael Jackson are two completely different skills. He worked with choreographers who had danced with Michael, people who knew that when Michael threw his arm out, it wasn't just choreography, it was punctuation. It was the physical manifestation of what the music was doing in his head. Every gesture mattered. Every angle counted. And then there was the psychological preparation. Understanding Michael at different ages. The confident 10-year-old leading the Jackson 5. The uncertain teenager navigating fame. The visionary adult creating Thriller. The vulnerable human being trying to hold on to himself while the world wanted pieces of him. Jaafar had to find all of those versions and make them feel like the same person growing and changing and surviving. Here's what nobody talks about. The pressure. Jaafar wasn't just playing a character. He was playing his uncle, his grandmother's son, his father's brother, his cousin's father. Every single day on set, he was walking into a room full of people who had known Michael personally, who had memories and opinions and grief that was still raw 15 years later. One wrong move, one moment that felt inauthentic. And he wasn't just failing as an actor, he was failing his family. The first time Jaafar had to film a scene where young Michael performs at the Apollo Theater, his father Jermaine visited the set. Jaafar didn't know he was coming. He was in the middle of a take, singing "I Want You Back," moving through the choreography, when he saw Jermaine standing just off camera. For a split second, he froze. Not physically, but internally. After the take, Jermaine walked onto the set. The crew thought he was going to give notes, offer corrections, maybe ask for a different approach. Instead, he pulled Jaafar aside and said something that nobody else could hear. Later, when asked about it, Jaafar would only say, "My dad told me what Uncle Michael told him the night before they signed with Motown. I carry that with me in every scene." Listen to this. Around week 6 of shooting, Jaafar started getting too careful, too precise. He was hitting every mark, nailing every move, but something was missing. That wild creative spark that made Michael unpredictable. Fuqua called him aside after a scene and said something that Jaafar later described as the moment everything changed. "Stop trying to be perfect." Michael wasn't perfect. He was brilliant because he was willing to fail in front of everyone if it meant finding something nobody had seen before. The next scene they shot was a studio moment. Michael working with Quincy Jones on Thriller. The script called for Michael to do a specific vocal run, hit it clean, move on. Jaafar got to the middle of the take, and something in his instinct said, no, that's not what he would have done. So he stopped. Middle of the take. Crew watching. Cameras rolling. And he did it again. But different. Rougher. More raw. More human. Fuqua didn't call cut. He let Jaafar work through it. 4 takes of the same moment. Each one different. Each one revealing a new layer. When they finally broke, Kendrick Sampson, who plays Quincy Jones, walked over and said, "That's him. That's Michael." The film wrapped in May 2024. Then came the edit. Then came the reshoot in June 2025, because they needed more footage to make the timeline work. The original cut was 3.5 hours. There were conversations about splitting it into 2 films. The studio was nervous. The budget was climbing past $150 million. The release date kept shifting. October 2025, then pushed to April 26. But Graham King knew something. The nervous executives didn't. He knew that if Jaafar's performance landed the way he believed it would, none of the concerns would matter. November 6, 2025. They dropped the first teaser trailer, 90 seconds. No dialogue. Just music and movement and one shot of Jaafar as Michael, frozen in mid-spin. That made every Michael Jackson fan on the planet stop scrolling. Within 24 hours, the trailer had become the most viewed music biopic teaser in history. 116.2 million views. Not just views. Engagement. People watching it 5, 6, 7 times in a row, sharing it with captions like, "I can't breathe," and "This is the one." The numbers kept climbing. Social media became a phenomenon. TikTok filled with side-by-side comparisons. Jaafar's moonwalk next to Michael's moonwalk, frame-by-frame analysis. Dance professionals breaking down the mechanics, pointing out that Jaafar wasn't just copying the moves, he was capturing the intention behind them. Music reactors watching the trailer on repeat, pausing every 3 seconds to point out details. The way his hand curved, the angle of his head, the expression in his eyes, during that one moment where he looks directly at the camera. Twitter threads went viral, analyzing everything from the costume accuracy to the period-correct studio equipment visible in the background. Film critics who normally ignored music biopics started writing think pieces. Michael Jackson fan communities that had spent years being defensive, protecting his legacy from misrepresentation, started cautiously, carefully saying, "This might actually be it." And all of this was happening while the clock ticked down to April 24, 2026. Then February 2026. They dropped the full trailer, the one with dialogue, the one where you hear Jaafar speak in Michael's voice, the one where Coleman Domingo as Joe Jackson delivers that line about winners and losers, and you can see young Michael's face change in real time. The one where Katherine, played by Nia Long, says, "I knew you were different the moment you were born." The response was even bigger. Social media exploded. Lionsgate stock jumped. Pre-sales went through the roof. And somewhere in all that chaos, Katherine Jackson sat in her home in California and watched her grandson become her son on screen. For the first time in a long time, she felt like maybe the world was going to see the truth. She had carried this weight for 15 years, the weight of protecting Michael's legacy while the world picked it apart. The weight of knowing the truth and watching lie after lie go unchallenged. The weight of being his mother while the planet debated who he was. Now watching Jaafar in that trailer, she felt something shift. Not relief exactly. Permission. Permission to believe that this time, someone got it right. Hold this in your mind, because here's what makes this different from every other music biopic. This isn't a sanitized version. This isn't the estate trying to erase the complicated parts. John Logan's script goes there. It shows the pressure, the pain, the cost of being Michael Jackson, the isolation, the manipulation, the moments where the kid from Gary, Indiana, just wanted to be normal and couldn't be. And Jaafar had to play all of it, the joy and the grief, the confidence and the fear. The kid who could command a stadium of 70,000 people and then go home and feel completely alone. That's the performance Fuqua and King were chasing. That's what Katherine approved. Not a tribute, not a celebration. The truth. April 24th, 2026. That's the date. Mark it. Lionsgate and Universal Pictures rolling it out worldwide. IMAX. Dolby. Every format that can do justice to the music and the movement. 3.5 hours. No intermission. The director's cut that Fuqua fought for and won. The version that shows you not just what Michael did, but why he did it, what he sacrificed, what he gained, what he lost. There's already talk of a sequel. The footage exists. The second half of Michael's life. The dangerous era. The controversies. The trials. The comeback attempts. The final years. Lionsgate CEO Adam Fogelson hinted at it in an earnings call. While we're not yet ready to confirm plans for a second film, the creative team is hard at work, making sure we're in a position to deliver more Michael soon after we release the first film. But right now, in this moment, the focus is on April 24th, on Jaafar's performance, on whether a 27-year-old kid with no major film experience can convince the world that he is Michael Jackson. The early screening responses say yes. The trailer numbers say yes. Katherine Jackson's 3 words say yes. Notice something about those 3 words. Jaafar embodies my son. Not looks like, not sounds like, embodies. That's a choice. That's Katherine Jackson, who knew Michael better than anyone on this planet, saying that her grandson found the thing that nobody else could find. The essence, the spirit, the truth, underneath the myth. If you enjoyed spending this time here, I'd be grateful if you'd consider subscribing. A simple like also helps more than you'd think. The movie releases in 68 days. The marketing campaign is ramping up. The merchandise is being finalized. The soundtrack is being cleared. The press tour is being scheduled. Theaters are already adding extra IMAX screens to meet demand. Pre-sale numbers are tracking higher than any music biopic in the past decade. Industry analysts are predicting opening weekend numbers that could rewrite the record books. And somewhere in Los Angeles, Jaafar Jackson is preparing for the moment when the lights go down in thousands of theaters around the world, and people see him become his uncle. This is where Michael's story begins again, not as a memory, not as a legend, as a living, breathing, complicated human being who changed music forever and paid a price most of us can't imagine. told by someone who carries his blood and his burden, and his belief that music can change the world. If you want to know what Katherine whispered to Jaafar after that first screening room moment, the thing she said that nobody else heard, tell me in the comments.